Hello, welcome back. So my name's Daniel Gamali. I bought a chess book on eBay because it's very hard to find chess books in shops. I don't tend to do much online shopping actually, or I didn't in the past, but there's a lot of stuff you can't easily buy from physical shops. I'm a little bit old school, I tend to buy stuff from physical shops. Anyway, this book is called Grind Like a Grandmaster. It's really all about the attributes you need to kind of grind down your opponents. So obviously Magnus Owen Carlsen from Norway is a famous, for very, being a very good positional and endgame player, but also just being a phenomenal player full stop. A lot of people think that Magnus is the best player who's ever played the game. I'm not qualified to say, but he's obviously one of the best. There's no question about it. And David Howe is less well known in many ways, but he's also a very strong player and very strong. So David there is on the the right of the book, and Magnus there is kind of giving him kind of like the laser style. I think this is a skit on this TV series called The Boys, which originally was a comic, but then was made into an Amazon Prime TV series. So you got this guy called Homelander, who's like this bad kind of superhero guy, right? And I actually think the TV series is better than the comics. By the way, House of the Dragon's starting again soon, so that'd be quite good fun. But yeah, Grind Like a Grandmaster. So one of the things I noticed in this book is I think it did a good job this book of really combining the educational sides of chess writing. It's very hard, I know from experience, it's very hard to write chess books. And it's very hard to get a good balance. And I think this book really does that. It gets a good balance between, really educating you. It doesn't overwhelm you with variations. There's not hundreds of variations in there. I think they're trying to advertise to a wider audience, or trying to be attractive to a wider audience. And there is that kind of element of where it's also educational as well, so it's kind of entertaining but also educational. So I think they struck the right balance there. I mean, the book I think overall is very good. It kind of uses this conversational style, so it's like a conversation between Magnus and David. And that's very interesting. I think David is an underrated writer as well. He's also obviously more famous as a chess journalist, but he does write a book. So he writes a column for the Sunday Telegraph, I believe, or the Sunday Times, and he probably should write more chess books, judging by this book. I think he's a very good writer, but obviously with chess books, very hard to make money from them. Someone like Magnus would obviously, I imagine this is going to sell very well, right? Because you got Magnus affiliated with a book, so it's going to bump up the sales. But overall, chess books don't sell very well. They're not worth the effort. If you're doing making a good living from commentary, you should stick with that. But obviously, David decided he wanted to write a chess book. I think this is a very good chess book overall. I suppose one of the complaints you could make about the book is maybe they don't talk enough about how much hard work you have to do to get to that level. They talk about the things that you need to do, but the actual work itself that you need, I must admit I haven't read all of the book. I've just read like about half of it so far, but obviously to get to that level you need to do a phenomenal amount of work. There needs to be like a huge amount of knowledge behind what they're doing. But they do give nice tips along the way, like Magnus talks about how important it is to centralise the queen, and he said that one of the things he noticed fairly early on was when you centralise your queen in queen and pawn endgames, there's very little that your opponent can do, and they're never going to have a perpetual check when you start running. If you're better in that endgame and you start running your king down the board, they're never going to be better. They're never going to be able to get perpetual check, I should say. David talks about this game. It's interesting actually. He mentions this game against Glenn Charles House at Southend, and he mentions how it was. So is this really? Oh no, hang on. This was also a brilliant game that Magnus won against Bu Zhangzi in China. But later on, there's this game where David plays a very nice which is something that I learned from as well. Actually, when I looked through it, I don't know as much technical stuff as these guys, or even close to it. And they were talking about opposite coloured bishop's endings and how a lot of people would assume that these are drawn, but there's actually more to it than that. And I know from my experience playing David that he's got a very nuanced understanding of chess that I probably lack, and that's probably why I've struggled against him. One of the reasons why I've struggled against him over the years. Yeah, so this game against Glenn Charleshouse, who funny enough was caught up in this scandal, pension scandal recently, with Simon Williams, who's a friend of ours, and also Gary Quillen. But he was David was playing Glenn Charleshouse at Southend, and he played this amazing endgame against Glenn Charleshouse, and he won. It looked like a very drawish ending, and he talks about interesting things that David talks about, how he talks about the body language when the opponent's body language changes, and he could tell that his opponent had basically, was relieved, knew that he was going to make a draw at that point, but David realised there was more to it from that position. So that was an interesting insight as well. So there's lots of interest. I mean, it's a really good book. Obviously, the whole conversational style has been done before, so it's not particularly groundbreaking, but you don't generally get a conversation between two world-class GMs, in a chess book. So that's something that makes it stand out. I mean, for example, you had Agard possibly doing something similar with Gelfand, but again, Agard wouldn't be in the same class as Magnus Carlsen. No disrespect to him. I think some of these American authors have done this conversational style before. But overall, a very good chess book. I'll just shortly talk about my experience of writing chess books. I mean, I've written quite a few books now, but from my experience, they don't sell very well. Obviously, if I was Magnus Carlsen, I'm not of that level, but if I was Magnus Carlsen or that famous, I could hope to sell a lot more copies, I suppose, and therefore it'd be worthwhile writing chess books. I don't think Magnus really did it for the money. I don't think he needs the money. Just, it's nice to write a chess book, right? But I'm not sure I'm going to write many chess books in the future, to be honest, because the money that I've got from the more recent books I've written has been very, very poor, and you have to put a lot of effort in to write a chess book. I know these guys must have put a lot of effort in to write this book. It's a lot of work for very minimal rewards, relatively speaking. If you do a course probably on Chessable, you're probably going to make more. If you just generally do streaming or commentary work from day to day, you're probably going to make more from that. If you do coaching, you're probably going to make more than you do writing a chess book. A lot of the reasons why people write chess books, it's nice to get a book published. And you're also getting potentially long-term royalties. You might get a nice little check every year from that book. But yeah, that's my review of Grind Like a Grandmaster. I say David Howe, he's a league chess grandmaster with 2,700 plus peak rating. I mean, David has been one of the best players in England for many, many years. And I first played David when he was 7, actually. He was a very good junior as well. And as you would expect, he played, I played him in some kind of chess training session for Coulston Chess Fellowship. You could tell immediately he was putting his piece on the right squares. He was a very strong player, even at a very young age, and had a lot of battles with him over the years, with not much success from my side. I think I struggle against David because he's got that kind of style where he's very good positionally. So he doesn't give you many chances. I play against someone like Gawain, I've generally had a slightly better record. Not that I got a great record against Gawain, but it's slightly more loose. He'll give you more chances, because he's more like aggressive type player. Whereas David is very patient, and that comes across in the book. But that's something I think you need to work on. If people want to get to a high level, they need to work on the grinding skills, because the end game skills, the technical skills, because this is an element of the game that really has to be at a high level. I don't have as much endgame knowledge as Magnus Carlsen. To get to a high level, I would have to have that level of endgame expertise, those technical skills of a David Howell, of a Magnus Carlsen, to get to that higher level. You know, when you haven't got that skills, you're always going to be limited to what level you can get to. And one of the things I noticed when I was writing a recent book was I was talking a lot about technical side. I was talking about how I didn't know how to mate with knight and bishop against king, even though I'm a GM. Actually, funny enough, the only time I had that in a proper game was in a sort of lockdown tournament where I was playing against David, and I was on the bad side of it, and he had he was black in that game. And he had the knight and bishop and the king against the king, and he managed to checkmate me. But it's very rare that you get an endgame. I just didn't know how to win it, so I had to train with the computer to work out how to win it. And eventually I got quite good at it. But now I've forgotten how to do it again, so I probably need to train it again, right? But yeah, it's funny how those skills can really improve your results, you know. And I started playing more because I was doing that for that book. I then played a tournament, and I actually played amazingly well. I played like my first 6 games. I was winning all these end games. I was like, wow, you know, this goes to show. And the thing is, you're not putting yourself under as much pressure when you're playing positional chess, right? When you know you've got that positional ability, that endgame ability, you're not putting yourself under as much pressure to win early on in the game. You know you've got that in your locker. So you can basically just chill out, right? But when you don't have those skills, you kind of feel like, right, I've got to win the game really, really, really early on. You know, just try to play position, just try to chill out, just try to, you know, your chess strength is going to improve enormously. That's what I got from that tournament. So yeah, so really good book. Check that out. There's loads of chess books out there which are really good, to be honest. And but this is particularly like a nice book because I think it really gets the right kind of you know, just balance between educational and, you know, and entertaining. You know, it doesn't feel boring to read, and also at the same time you feel you're learning something. So that's a really good book.